already. The young savage certainly showing that 2016 was just the start of his reign in Hearthstone. We have been keeping track of several more matches, but we are going to be moving into DrJikininki versus Zalae. Zalae on Luminosity Gaming, a fantastic, very prominent player, has been around forever. So we are going to be going into game number 3. So far, both players have picked up wins with their Pirate Warriors. It was actually Pirate Warrior versus Aggro Rogue, and then the exact reverse.
Exactly, that happened, and it was very similar, but we are not watching the game 3, where for the first time we'll see the tempo mage from Zalae. Unfortunately for him, he has a very slow opening hand. Usually in this matchup, you would like to just get some value from Sorcerer's Apprentice and a Frostbolt for 1 mana to just get a minion out of the board as soon as possible. But also in this matchup is very important the fact that the rogue, in this case of DrJikininki, will have some value out of Ardent Spires. They are perfect targets for Cold Bloods, they are perfect targets for basically trading with your hero power as well against minions like Sorcerer's Apprentice. So having, for DrJikininki, having the opener here is super important, especially when you see you already have a plan for your hand, for your entire hand. So you have Edwin, you have a Horse Rider, which is a perfect turn 3 play, and you still can take advantage of any trades.
Yeah, the rogue is definitely set up in a fantastic position with the early hand. The only thing it's missing at this point would be some cheap removal spells. A backstab and eviscerate would be fantastic. But the aggro rogue is really something that's come to prominence very recently off the back of Muzzy, like Subtle and Raven were talking about. And the tempo mage also is one of the newer popular additions to this tournament. Obviously, it's been around forever, but seeing these two decks together is something that, well, hasn't happened yet so far. So how would you say the Tempo Mage fares against the Aggro Rogue instead of, say, the Miracle Rogue?
I would say there's actually more favored against the Aggro Rogue than against mid-range decks, because of the fact that cards like Arcane Missiles, Arcane Blasts can give you so much advantage when it comes to tempo. But at the same time, as you just can see yourself, this is a flickable flame, I would say, and you just can miss twice, you're still losing tempo because of the random effect of the card. And imagine if that Arcane Missile would have killed the Horse Rider. The situation would have been so much different. Now, for DrJikininki, this is additional damage that is piling on, and he is drawing potions to combo it with Edwin next turn. So this is actually a really good setup for DrJikininki. For Zalae, unfortunately not looking that great, especially since, well, now it's kind of better because of the Sorcerer's Apprentice, but if you have to use all of your spells for the full amount of mana without any synergy with Flamewaker, for example, you're in a really bad spot because you will be running out of cards at some point.
Yeah, the mage needs to find the moment where they're able to go from the defensive burn your minions plan to the point where they can actually extend onto the board, and then, well, their burn essentially should be going face.
Yeah, they can do both of those things at the same time because of the cost reduction that they will get from the Sorcerer's Apprentice, and because of the fact that, an example, Flamewaker just works as spell power, right? So if you can combo both of those cards with spells and chain it up, you're gaining not only value but also tempo, and suddenly you're ahead, even when you're in the defensive position in the beginning. But now look at that. What is happening, Cora?
This is a very powerful turn for DrJikininki. So essentially, he's getting rid of one of his toxins, which is the Shadow Step toxin, in essence, for 1 mana, to be able to replay the Argent Squire and essentially get +4/+4 on his Edwin Van Cleef. So instead of, saving that potion for later on, he's using it now to put down this large Edwin. Against Reno Mage, they would have Polymorph. Sometimes they have Flame Lance. But against Tempo Mage, the hardest removal is going to be Fireball plus a hero power on turn 5 for Zalae with the coin. So essentially, that Edwin is very, very difficult to remove.
I really like this play by DrJikininki. It just shows that he knows exactly what he needs to do to guarantee damage out of the Edwin, because, as you said, turn 5 with the coin is just Fireball pink, and you can kill that Edwin even if it has.
And I mean, look at Jikininki's hand. It's double Cold Blood and then the Briarthorn Toxin, I believe, which is +3 attack to a minion.
That's a lot of
That's a lot of damage so far.
Yeah, especially now that you have 2 resilient creatures, you can guarantee that the damage will be going through. The only problem is the fact that even if you stack up the damage on the Argent's fire, it can be killed with the hero power, so you would like to divide that damage on something that is more resilient. In this case, well, Edwin is the perfect target, right? Zalae, though, he has to switch up his plan. He wanted really to play minions this turn and just try to switch the tempo of the entire game. But in this case, he needs to use the Frostbolt defensively so he can remove Edwin next turn. Little he knows, another Shadow Step comes into the play. And now DrJikininki has a way of kind of healing back the Edwin by just replaying him. And this is kind of crazy because now this turn, he has access to go with an Azure Drake to draw a card, so gain value basically, equip, let's say enable combo for Edwin, and then replay Edwin with the Shadow Step because it will be only for 1 mana when you return it to his hand. So this is exactly 6. This is a perfect thing for him because not only he heals the Edwin, he basically set up 2 threats.
Yeah, the Shadow Step is incredibly flexible in this deck. They are running 2 copies each. And aside from the obvious, Leroy Jenkins Shadow Step, Leroy, like the old days of Miracle, classic Miracle Rogue. The Shadow Step here can be used, on Azure Drake if you need more draw, on Edwin if you would like to make a bigger Edwin, on Argent Force Rider or Patches. It has a lot of flexibility in this deck, in combination with your damage buff cards, to be able to put constant charge minions on the board and keep that constant pressure. So DrJikininki does sacrifice the 8/5 Edwin, but putting it up to 6 means that it is a little bit stronger in the long run. Unfortunately for him, Zalae does have the Fireball in hand, which is an easy counter, but Zalae needs to find time to develop onto the board, or he's never going to be able to win this game.
That is true. For Dr. DrJikininki, it's fine if the Fireball will just be played this turn, because of the fact that with the additional 2 or 3 mana, if Zalae will use the coin, you can't really develop much. So the Azure Drake will get a full turn of value, and that is really important because you can stack up damage. You can develop even 1 Cold Blood on it just to have additional pressure. And that puts Zalae in an awkward spot because he used a Frostbolt, he used a Fireball, and he used an Arcane Missiles. So what has he left when it comes to the spells that will be needed to play on the Azure Drake? Not really that much, right? He has Firelance Portal, 2 of those in the deck, so that might be a possibility. But then if he uses the Firelance Portal, the other minion still is sticking to the board and is dealing consistent damage.
Yeah, so this has actually taken definitely a turn in Zalae's favor. He still has 23 health to DrJikininki's 25, but considering the disparity in quality of the opening hands, DrJikininki was so far ahead in the first several turns, and now Zalae has really been able to portion out his burn effectively to give him a point where he can attempt to move back in on the board. Now, this turn from DrJikininki, again, was able to help him go wide. The Buccaneer was a fantastic draw, and now Zalae is forced to use single target removal, but then he's at the mercy of the rest of the board. So he does not have any AoE to be able to, once again, try to swing this into his favor.
For me, it's very interesting that DrJikininki didn't opt to use any of his buffs in his hand. Because, first of all, your hand is very one-dimensional. You need to use it at some point to just give more burst damage, right? So in this case, you know that you will not be trading with any other creatures, because you use the patches to attack into the opponent's face, and most likely will die next turn. But if you play one of the Cold Bloods on a minion right now that you get the value out of, you guarantee basically that your opponent needs to use a point removal on that creature. And if you go wide with Small Time Buccaneer patches, well, that means the other creatures will live. For Zalae, the Flamewaker was a huge pickup because now he can take advantage of the fact that he didn't use the coin yet.
Yes.
And that's basically changing it into a 2/3 of an Arcane Missile for 0 mana.
That's pretty good. Unfortunately, the missile shots from the Flamewaker weren't exactly what he wanted. He would have liked to be able to clear off that Small-Time Buccaneer for sure. But actually, looking at Zalae's deck list, he does not have Flame Strike in the build. So the top end is Antonidas, Firelance, Portal, and Ragnaros. Meaning that if DrJikininki knew that there was no Flame Strike in Zalae's list, which the decks are public, they know what they're up against, then he was safe to be able to go wide, and now was able to use the burn this turn and essentially throw it all at face and close out this game.
The massive burst, just finish off the game. Rogue does what it does, so just buff the main creature.
Yeah, it was a great 3-turn setup from DrJikininki, but we're going to be heading back to the main set very quickly for some updates. What's up, Raven and Zalae?
Hey, we're good, we're good. We're just giving you some updates on some of the matches and some of the players that have been going on here in round 2. We do know that Firebat, first of all, did win his round, so he is now 1-1 in it. So he is still fighting strong after a bit of a hiccup early on. And then we have Sidonia, who is 0-2, which is really looking like he's going to be out after qualifying through the Tavern Hero.
Yeah, Firebat actually tweeted as well that he wasn't happy with the way he played in the opening round game. He said, I lost because my opponent played better than me. And Lothar and I were backstage watching that game. We definitely disagreed with a few of the plays as well. But glad to see he's tightened it up, said he was much happy with his second round performance. He's back up to 1-1 now. He'll be looking for probably a 6-1 because of the early loss, ruining his tiebreakers. And on that same point, Sidonia 0-2. If you want to be very technical about it, he's not literally out, but it's almost impossible to go from 0-2 to 5-2 and have good enough tiebreakers to progress. So looks like the curse of the caster prediction board is back in full force, Cora.
Yeah, well, I can't say I'm too surprised. I have never been right up to this point as to who my predictions are. I think so. Thank you very, very much. That feeds me with so much hope going forward. But regardless, let's go ahead and get into game number 4 between the Doctor himself and, of course, the deck doctor, Zalae. So this one is going to be, I just came up with that on the fly. I'm really proud of that.
That is impressive.
Thank you. That is going to be the Tempo Mage for Zalae and the Reno Warlock for DrJikininki. So actually, some really interesting tech choices in Jikininki that I want to point out. Curse of Rafam and Fellfire Potion. What do you make of that, Lothar?
Well, Curse of Rafam is amazing against Reno Mage, basically, because you can kill them even if they have an Ice Block in play. So that seems like a good option.
Pretty good.
And we have seen, and last week we have seen already here, that Reno Mage against Reno Warlock is a common matchup. So this is one of the tech choices for Dr.Jikininki. When it comes to the Fellfire Potion, I'm not entirely sold on it. It seems like a card decent against mid-range decks, but in this really aggressive metagame, the Fellfire Potion is not really doing what you want to have against, you know, aggro Pirate Warrior against aggro Shaman. You're still getting damage to your own face. And when it comes to the metagame, Pirate Warriors is the weapon of choice. 69% of the players are playing that deck. Aggro Shaman 66. So it's actually a really aggressive metagame.
Yeah, it's definitely a riskier tech choice. In certain situations, it's absolutely a fantastic card, but dealing 5 damage to yourself can come back to bite you. And actually, the Tempo Mage is an aggressive deck in its own right. However, the Fellfire Potion would clear off pretty much all of Zalae's early and mid-game minions, so we'll see if he actually finds a place to make that tech choice work. So just some really straightforward early game from Zalae. The Mana Worm and the Sorcerer's Apprentice coming down. Arcane Intellect is really nice. He's got to keep refueling. To keep up with the Reno Warlock, the Tempo Mage needs to heavily rely on the Acolytes of Pain, the Arcane Intellect, and the Azure Drakes, essentially, to be able to keep that value.
He basically has 2 ways of winning the game. Historically speaking, Tempo Mages was always has always have an advantage against Warlock decks. For example, against Handlock, against Reno Warlock, because of the fact that they have so much projectile damage.
Yeah.
Always. So if they just hit a early development of the board with some minions, and then they will finish up the game with a fireball to the face, that's the plan. That's like the main idea of how they want to finish this game. Because of the fact that Warlocks have to deal with the board by dealing some damage to themselves as well. Hellfire, right?
Yep.
Even if you kill 2 minions, you will get 3 damage to your own face, and that fireball might be lethal. And for Zalae, if he wants to develop the board and will have access to burn, and he has access to burn right now, there's already a torch and the Firelance Portal in his hand. He's looking really great into this match.
Yeah, we've obviously been seeing more of the Reno Mage versus the Reno Warlock, but for a lot of the same reasons that the Reno Mage is effective against the Reno Warlock. It has strong early game and mid game minions, and it has a lot of burn in the late game. The Tempo Mage is even better. Because the density of minions is obviously going to be higher, and the burn potential with Flame Waker, 2 copies of Fireball, Roaring Torch, 2 copies of Firelance Portal is even greater. And obviously Ragnaros has been a fantastic card in, you know, pretty much forever. Since the inundation of the game, Ragnaros has seen play, and in this matchup, no different than others, he is going to be 8 damage to face, putting Zalae that much closer to being able to burn out his opponent.
especially in this meta where Reno Warlocks kind of play less amount of minions that can overextend the board, so there's less targets for Ragnaros to hit. So if there's only one target, that's most likely his face. That means Zalae will be doing with one card the two things that he wants to do in this game: develop the board and deal damage to his opponent's face. So it's quite important that he has access to those cards. The mirror image is not really that great, but at the same time, what does the mirror image here is the fact that when you're being cleaned up by an AoE effect, you can have still one threat on the board that you will follow up with mirror image, and your opponent will have to use a direct removal, or else, he will not be able to attack and trade for that one threat. So it's a good follow-up after a cleanup from Hellfire, Shadow Flame, or the Fellfire Potion in this case. But as we said before, the Fellfire Potion might be a double-edged sword for DrJikininki here. Doctor who? DrJikininki.
There you go. Yeah, and that's actually a fantastic point. So like if we take a look at the Doctor's hand, it's very reactive at this point. He doesn't have any pressure of his own. He does have the Blast Crystal Potion for single target removal, and the Curse of Rafaam in this matchup, it's kind of dead. He was playing it for Reno Mage. This is tempo. They don't play any secrets unless you're playing a rogue babbling book and it gives you a secret. But in this case, no babbling books in Zalae's list. There's not going to be any secrets here. So Curse of Rafaam may be 2 damage burst if he needs it, but it's essentially looking like a dead card in Drjikininki's hand.
That is true. There's also a decline in amount of secrets that we'll see this weekend. Because of the one fact is that implies that is the amount of tempo mages that we'll see.
Yeah.
They are not playing any secrets anymore. When we had Mid Scientist, of course, we had mirror entities, and that was really a playable card. But in this case, they are just relying on minions and pure damage, and that's about it. But back to the game, turn 6 for Zalae was insane. The top deck Emperor is just nuts. Complete nuts, because first of all, it's a really good minion. 5/5 stats against the DrJikininki will just force him to remove that creature. First of all, because it's 5 damage. Second of all, because of its effect that is reducing the cost of the card in Zalae's hand. But that's not even that important. One card is really important is Ragnaros. Because now it can be played in curve from this as a Doomsayer on the board.
Yeah, that was some great forward thinking from Drjikininki. Unfortunately for him, he had to give up the Blast Crystal Potion on the Emperor Thaurissan. There are certainly larger targets in Zalae's deck, the Archmage and the Ragnaros namely.
Definitely.
But like you were saying, the Emperor Thaurissan is such a priority target. You can't let that get multiple discounts against the Tempo Mage. It just allows them to completely go off with Flame Waker and burn spells.
Suddenly, it's a combo deck.
Exactly. Suddenly the burst damage is even greater than it was. So playing the Doomsayer down, Drjikininki is attempting to throw the board initiative back into his favor, and he's going to have a chance to do just that here.
That is an interesting turn, because that was an option actually to just kill the Doomsayer and develop the board with 2 minions. Zalae could have played the Mana Worm into Firelands Portal, deal 5 damage to the Doomsayer, and follow it up with the Archon Blast. But there are a few things that you have to consider when playing the Tempo Mage. So one of the facts is that he has Flame Waker in his hand. If you will use the Archon Blast, he loses the potential value out of it with the Flame Waker. So that was one of the considerations that he had to make. But at the same time, I feel like he lost a lot of tempo that turn. Now it all depends on the Flame Waker shots, if he can get back.
Yeah, and he does have fantastic opportunity here. Obviously, the Firelands Portal, coupled with the Flame Waker, can clear up this board relatively easily. It looks like he's just going to have to make the decision whether or not he can go ahead and do that this turn, or whether or not he has to build a bigger board. The thing is, if he builds the bigger board, Zalae hasn't seen any AoE from Drjikininki yet. He hasn't seen Hellfire, he hasn't seen Shadow Flame, and the Fellfire Potion.
Well, he saw the Fellfire Potion.
Yes.
But in this case, this is a very interesting turn. Because he did draw the Frostbolt, I was thinking maybe he should go for Mana Worm, Flame Waker, Frostbolt, and then go with Mirror Images and Archon Blast, because it almost guarantees a trade if you you know, a little bit lucky.
Yeah.
But you develop the Mana Worm, which is such a huge threat against almost anything that the Warlock will do. And it's turn 7, so if Reno Jackson will be played, it's not really that big of a deal because it heals for 15 and it's off curve.
Yeah.
And you have Mana Worm that will just ramp up really quickly when it comes to the amount of damage it can deal. And now Zalae is just kind of in a position where that Mana Worm has less potential. Right?
Yeah, obviously, as TJ liked to coin it, the post-Reno damage is very important. Reno decks want to play Reno essentially on an empty board. If you Reno and your opponent has a large board, then you're buying yourself a turn, but you're never really going to be able to throw the game back into your favor. So while the Mana Worm is going to be less effective moving on, Zalae's board is very threatening in its own right, and we're looking at DrJikininki's hand. He doesn't have a lot of options. He does pick up the Reno, but playing the Reno onto this board, he would likely have to Soulfire, you know, and pick either the Flamewaker or I believe that's the Grime Street Enforcer. It's the 5-mana 4/4 buff all your minions in hand by +1/+1 at the end of the turn. He's going to have to decide which of these minions is a bigger threat.
Yeah, and that's kind of silly when you think about it, because now the Flamewaker is still on board. So that's not that's so silly. Like, you never want to leave the Flamewaker on board against a Tempo Mage, right? Interesting enough, DrJikininki was forced to use the Reno Jackson, so that's not really a great turn. He healed only for 15. Okay, only for 15. When you think about it, that's
still
crazy,
a large
right?
heal, yes.
6 mana, you get a minion on board that is 4/6, you heal for 15. Well, that's worth it, right?
Absolutely.
But the potential was bigger. But now the question is, how do you deal with what's being on the board, because you don't have the reset button that usually the Reno Jackson means in this matchup, right? So for DrJikininki, this might be a slippery slope in the next turns, unless the Flamewaker will not be lucky enough to kill off the entire board.
Well, he's got one more spell to do it. So far, the Flamewaker shots have been pretty on point. If he wants to go ahead and expend the second mirror image, he does have 2 more chances to get 1 hit on the Reno and fully clear off this board. This is a very strange position where the Tempo Mage is actually equal in cards with the Reno Warlock. Usually Life Tap is just able to give the Warlock so much value that you're never going to be able to match them card for card. But in this case, Zalae has been putting on so much pressure that DrJikininki has had to use all of his removal, all of the smaller minions in his hand to be able to keep up and try to get to a point where he can turn the tides of this game. The Hellfire is actually a little bit awkward here for him because he's in the face of 4 health minions.
That is correct. And I'm just thinking about the possible outcomes of this turn, and really nothing just comes to mind as an auto play, because you would really like to kill that Flamewaker, but there's literally no option of doing that, which is awkward. The Hellfire, as I said, 3 damage only, and 2/4 HP minions on board. That was really not great. So now let's look for Zalae. He has insane amount of spells that can be used this turn. He has access to 10 mana. So maybe that's the turn when finally the Mana Worm will come into play. We have to remember it has actually stats 2 and 4 because he was buffed. The same goes for Ragnaros. Now it's 9/9, but it doesn't matter because he always shoots for 8.
Yes. Well, this is a lot of damage for Zalae, and I think we actually saw him do a little fist bump last turn because DrJikininki didn't have Shadow Flame.
Yeah.
If he had Shadow Flame on the Reno Jackson, that would have been a full board clear. And Zalae would have had a very hard time expending resources back into the board simply because he's running out of minions. But now that he has the Azure Drake and the Flamewaker that are able to stick, by using some of his burn on these minions, Jikininki's only at 3 cards in hand. So Zalae is essentially just going to try and push his board initiative, try to clear out this game within the next couple of turns.
Well, that is correct. And I'm just thinking for DrJikininki, what can he do to switch this around? And he used the Reno Jackson, he used the Fire Potion, he still has access to Siphon Soul and Abyssal Enforcer, but Siphon Soul can remove only 1 threat, and he just did draw the Siphon Soul, so he can kill, an example, the Azure Drake or the Mana Worm.
But there's the Ragnaros in hand.
Yeah, and then you lose almost every single possibility to deal with the Rag or the Antonidas,
Yes.
for example. And that has to be kept in mind. But at the same time, you know that this is the final call. If you don't do anything right now, you will not win the game long term. So I really like a decision to just go all in, and that seems like a turn for 4 damage Hellfire. I like that a lot. He lost the Faceless Manipulator, but at the same time, now he made a call that maybe wins him the game in the long term.
Yeah, this makes a lot of sense. DrJikininki really just playing to his outs here. He is running the Faceless Manipulator Leroy Jenkins Power Overwhelming combo, which is 20 damage maximum when discounted with Emperor Thaurissan, but in this case, you have no cards in hand. You're not getting those discounts. The combo is not going to close you out this game, so he instead chooses to use the Faceless Manipulator for essentially a 9-mana 2-card board clear with the Hellfire. Rolls right into Zalae with the Ragnaros, and DrJikininki does still have access to the Siphon Soul, but there is a great amount of burn in Zalae's hands, certainly more than enough to close out this game. It's going to be 10 exactly, I believe, with the Siphon Soul. Zalae's got 6 from Fireball, 3 from the Frostbolt, and then with the Hero Power, that's looking like it's going to be able to close out this game.
And Dr. DrJikininki can't really read this this turn. Like, the amount of cards that Zalae already used when it comes to direct damage was
been burned left and right the whole game.
Exactly. So he might count that there might be at least 1 minion or maybe even 2 in his hand, so that Dirty Rat doesn't really feel good at the same time. So you want really to play the Siphon, so you get to 10. Your only option to gain additional life in this game will be Kazakus, because he already played Refreshment Vendor as well.
Yes.
So, and Farseer. So he most likely will not go for a safe play, for a risky play with tapping into Kazakus or something like that, because he doesn't anticipate the burst damage. So for sure, he will just go for the Siphon Soul and building up small Broad.
Yep, and that is going to be enough. DrJikininki trying to save himself, but ultimately not enough in the face of the Fireball Frostbolt from Zalae. After that, Reno Jackson, there's just no more health in DrJikininki's deck. No Draxus, no Alexstrasza. Certainly not enough to be able to pull him back from the brink of death in that game.
15 health, not enough to heal when it comes to Reno Jackson. Has to be more.
Yeah, so we've actually got some live shots. We are, of course, competing from all across America. So this is Mesa, Arizona and Toronto, Canada. You can see certainly a few more people in Mesa than in Toronto, but we do have plenty of players playing from both of these locations. In Toronto, notably Fibonacci, Firebat, Purple, Silent Storm, and Italian. So these are absolutely huge names, certainly nothing to shirk at. They are, I'm sure, just off playing, devotedly, doing their absolute best to focus. And here we're going into game number 5. It is all tied up between DrJikininki and Zalae. The winner of this match will, of course, get their win for the second round.
This is the final game, and Zalae has to be happy about it. He has Aggro Rogue against the Reno Warlock. The problem is his hand is not really looking great. Again, he has a decent opener, so the Ardent Squire, but Leroy Jenkins already in hand. The Eviscerate is a huge downside when it comes to this deck, because those are the cards that you want to use as a finisher. Well, maybe Eviscerate will be used as a tempo card that clear up a minion, like an example, Azodrake or anything that has taunt in this case. But he is not picking any other minions. He would love to have an example, a 2-drop here, or already access to a 3-drop, 4-drop. He just wants to develop the board as soon as possible. Basically the same plan as Tempo Mage. Develop the board with some minions and finish up the game with direct damage to his opponent's face. But if those draws will be very similar to the first one and the second, this is not looking great for Zalae, especially for DrJikininki now.
Absolutely. Miracle Rogue usually has a favorable matchup against Reno decks because of the ability to conceal Questing Adventures, to conceal Edwin, to conceal Gadgetzin, and draw through their entire deck very rapidly and then burst down the opponent. This aggro rogue obviously doesn't have the ability to build up those larger minions, and instead is going for a steady stream of damage from turn 1. So the fact that Zalae hasn't really got that damage, he doesn't have any of his pirates, namely, which there are 5 in the deck, actually 6, and then the patches, of course, So the fact that his hand is so dense as far as high mana cost right now, really, really unfortunate and not at all what he wanted to see in his game plan.
Look at that, he's drawing all these spells and he can't really develop the board, not really looking great for Zalae. Another notable mention when it comes to this deck is the fact that it doesn't play sap anymore. So they sacrifice the ability to burst damage for the saps, and saps were crucial against decks that played heavy taunts. Right? You didn't sacrifice the eviscerates to clear over taunt, you just played sap for tempo play and go through with the damage that you had already developed on the board. In this case, for Zalae, he needs to use the spells that he has currently in hand just to get back on the board, but he cannot develop it at the same time. So let's look at turn 5 for Zalae. He knows that he will most likely play as a Drake. If he'll keep the backstab, it will deal 3 damage, so it will kill the ooze, but at the same time the blood imp still will be on the board, so the ooze, if there will be no other minions played, will be buffed to 4 HP. So then again, you will need to use another means of damage to just kill off the ooze. So this turn backstab is basically the same as next turn. So it's better to play it right now and just have, already saved 3 damage to the face.
It's a really awkward position. Actually, looking at the deck list once again, the only spells that Zalae is playing are Backstab, Shadow Step, Cold Blood, and then Eviscerate. So no preparation, no Conceal, no saps, like you said, and no Fan of Knives. So essentially, this Blood Imp will be staying on the board indefinitely. Like there is physically no way for Zalae to remove it unless Swashbuckler or Shaku were to give him a Warlock area of effect spell. So this is just, I mean, normally Blood Imp is not something that you want to have on your board. It's very easily removed. Maelstrom Portal, Fan of Knives in this meta, but here, that's a +1 health buff every turn.
Not only that, it also poses a threat because of the fact that DrJikininki is running 1 copy of PO for overwhelming. So in this case, it can be used as a means of trading or just finishing up the game. We know that DrJikininki is playing a combo version, so he will be looking to finishing with a burst. But at the same time, maybe the burst is not even needed, right? If you just develop the board and your opponent just, as in this game, Zalae doesn't develop the board, your minions like Kazakus can be just a beatdown, and they will deal the damage, because right now Zalae is really not looking great in this game.
Yeah, I mean, the rogues certainly can't afford to use their burst spells for removal, or especially against a Reno deck, which has so much heal. They simply will end up not being able to close out the game. So the Kazakus potion, we'll have to wait and see exactly which 2 choices he chose, but for 5 mana, even gain 7 armor and summon a 5/5 demon would be fantastic.
I love the play, sorry to kind of change the subject, but I love the play that DrJikininki just did right now. He read the hand, nothing was played on turn 3. What can be still in hand from Zalae? He kind of took a calculated risk and went for the Dr. Rat. For the Dirty Rat.
The Doctor's Dirty Rat.
Yeah, for the Dirty Rat, because he knew there's a high chance of just not hitting any relevant minion, or even maybe he will hit a minion like Leroy Jenkins that he can immediately kill. And that is insane value in this matchup, because you kind of kill the burst that Zalae has access to. So I really love that play.
Sounds like the rat went to medical school.
Kind of.
Dr. Rat.
Yeah.
That's
another thing to brag
chuckling about that one. Yeah, you might as well. You got your rat rants, you got your rat race, and now you have your doctorate. So that'd be pretty sweet.
That is true.
All right, so how does Zalae win this game? He has no chance of taking back the board. What are his outs, really, to be able to close out this game?
I'm thinking hard, and to be honest, I don't really see an easy way. Well, he needs to draw all the heavy hitters. So Tomb Pillagers, Azure Drake, those are like the best minions. Maybe Edwin, because you have access already to 7 mana, so it can be a 6/6 minion that is quite a. This will pose quite a problem for DrJikininki, but at the same time, the Dirty Rat is insane. I mean, will trade with all those minions here, right? So you have to sacrifice the Eviscerate, And if you sacrifice the Eviscerate, you pose, you will face a problem that, in example, after Reno Jackson and a single taunt, you almost have no way of finishing up the game. So this is why you need the Eviscerate just to guarantee yourself a win. And it seems like DrJikininki just built a wall and he's sitting happy there.
Built the wall and he's making Zalae pay for it. So, I mean, even if he wants, he can go ahead and faceless one of the taunts, and Zalae will have to, at some point, throw his burn damage into these taunts, which essentially might mean that he won't have enough to close out the game against DrJikininki in the long run post-Reno. We don't see a Reno yet, but the life totals are still very high on both sides, so
it's 27.
yeah, it's going to be a tough one.
27 for DrJikininki. It's turn 7 and aggro rogue basically did nothing.
I think it did
one damage.
Yeah, one damage.
One damage to the face, one life tap, basically. So the Warlock did more damage to himself than the
And
rogue.
Zalae did to him.
So this is
That's
not
unfortunate.
really. This is not really a good way of playing the game with the aggro rogues. Zalae is really in a terrible spot right now. Both
right,
Eviscerate played. Oh, this is so painful to watch.
I mean, there is still a lot of damage in the deck. You have Leroy plus double Shadow Step, 2 Cold Bloods, but losing both of your Eviscerates, it certainly hurts.
Okay, even with the cards that you mentioned, that's not enough damage to kill DrJikininki here.
Well, Leroy double Shadow Step is 18, plus double Cold Blood is 8, that's 20.
You would need to divide that
Yeah.
into 2 turns.
Yeah. Oh.
So that's
that's
not
gonna be
really
rough.
great. That's not
No.
really great. And your opponent, let's check if DrJikininki still has any taunt minions in the deck. So
He's not running
the
the Faceless Shambler.
Yeah, no Faceless Shambler and no Sun Fury Protector. So the only taunt minions that he has was already used. Okay, so those are good news for Zalae. Everything that he can deal damage with will go to the face most likely. Potion used by DrJikininki did draw 2 cards from his deck, and is that that's Demon Wrath, right? Okay.
Yes, and obviously the draw 2 cards gets DrJikininki closer to Reno Jackson, which will
Not really do much.
Essentially, I mean, if it gets down to it and Zalae does end up, going all in with Leroy, that would pretty much just close out this game. So the draw is certainly beneficial for DrJikininki. And now we have a Sen'jin Shieldmaster without taunt on the board, thanks to the Blood Imp that is just making this game ever so much more annoying. So Zalae's hand really is all about the burn plan. And
He needs to go off right now.
yeah, at this point, if he doesn't go for it, he has no way of winning. And if he goes for it and DrJikininki has any response, he still has no way of winning.
Yeah. For Zalae is basically setting up a winning plan, and I think the only winning plan is exactly this. Playing the Leroy Jenkins right now, not using any buffs on it, and then shadow stepping it back with the Zero Potion. So he has access to some potential damage next turn, and that means he can use 10, that's 12, 15, 16 damage with the dagger next turn. And that's still 2 off.
It's very close. He does have another Shadow Step in the deck. So essentially that Zero Potion gave him 6 more damage, which could be enough to close out this game. We don't see any heal in the hand of DrJikininki. Instead, he is stuck with Leroy combo pieces, something that he really does not need right now. He needs to find Reno or refreshment vendors, just something to put him slightly out of range. And unfortunately, he doesn't have it. Do you think it might come down to the point of Siphon Soul on your own
Yeah,
minion?
I would see that. That's a decent and common play that you see often being used, and especially against this deck, against the aggro rogue, because obviously your opponent doesn't have really big creatures. Even if it will be played like Tomb Pillager, right now it's not a problem, because you know that what you have to do is develop a board and just kind of threaten lethal in the upcoming turns, and that can be easily done because of the fact that he has Leroy Jenkins and PO. So using the Siphon Soul right now just guarantees that you don't die, because your opponent used to Eviscerates. He has access to Leroy, of course, because you know it's in hand. You can see there might be a second Cold Blood used and a second Shadow Step, so you know how much damage it will be.
That is a tough call. On one hand, Jikininki was at 18. Zalae knows there are 3 cards in hand, and he knows one of them is Leroy. So Zalae would need to find quite a bit more damage to be able to kill DrJikininki from 18. But he is deciding to play incredibly defensive and siphon souls his own Blood Imp, which has now gained somewhere in the league of 6 health for minions on board, and now 3 health for DrJikininki himself.
It was played on turn 2, if I remember correctly.
Yes. So I mean that's a pretty good Blood Imp if ever I've seen one. We'll give Blood Imp his time in the sun, and now Zalae once again needing to find that damage.
Zalae's at 15.
Could be a 3.
Neither
of us have great eyes.
No,
yeah.
no. Not really.
That's unfortunate.
We should think about that for tomorrow.
It is 13, I believe. It is 13. We've got the glasses. I mean, it depends on if the people want to see them. So, I mean, Zalae is going to go face here. The SI7 agent does pick up an extra 2 damage.
It can be played next turn, which guarantees a small burst. But yeah, Leroy Jenkins will finish up the game. And Zalae was closer than I thought it would be, because of the fact that he did get the Cold Blood and the Shadow Step. But what a game. Basically, in the beginning I said, it's a great matchup for the Rogue, right? But the draw was atrocious for Zalae. Leroy Jenkins in the opening hand, Eviscerate, then a backstep draw into an Eviscerate, didn't really allow Zalae to establish a board control and just push some damage and put some pressure on DrJikininki.
It was almost the exact reverse draw of what he wanted to have. He started off with Azure Drake and Leroy, and then started drawing Pirates on turn 4, turn 5. So really just an unfortunate draw for Zalae there, and DrJikininki going to close out that series 3 games to 2. I mean, what a win for him. Zalae is an incredibly prominent name, an incredibly talented player. And he's now got some work to do if he wants to be able to make it into the top 8 out of this Swiss bracket. But we are going to go ahead and throw it back over to Raven and Sottle. What's going on?